The next texture I'm going to teach you is sponge. How to use a sponge with watercolor. Right here is one of my examples that I did. I will show you, not all sponges are the same. It's great to go to the art supply store or online, buy natural sponges. Natural sponges to me, I think, are a little more interesting than a cellulose sponge under your sink. You can use those as well. The texture is a little different, but I highly recommend, try it. Cut up a sponge. Don't use the bristly side, but use the smoother side of the sponge and cut it in different shapes and you can use it. So I come in and soak the natural sponge and squeeze all the water out. Then I come in, and this is great for doing for trees. Again, people will do it. I do it in abstracts. Gosh, foliage, rocks, all kinds of just an interesting texture. Sponging. So I'm going to mix a couple colors in there. You can layer the sponge too. So I've got it wet, but I got all the water out. And you look for an interesting, this is smoother. When you buy sponges, look for ones that are different. Some that are smooth, that some have more texture. So, because the texture, how you're going to put it down is going to make a difference on what you're creating. So I come in there and it really soaks up the paint quickly. And this is the sponge technique, another very popular technique. If you go in one place too much, I'm going to just show you, if you go and handle one area too much, that's the texture you'll get, which is pretty cool. I think like if I was doing an old building, kind of has the modeling, if it was an old building in Europe, you could just sponge the side of it and it would be very interesting. But to get a lot of foliage, it's one of my favorite ways to do foliage too, is a sponge. I've come in and I'm mixing a little darker color, green, again soaking it up and coming back over the same area. But that's sponging. Wonderful, fun technique. Sponging. Always make sure then you clean your sponge out and get all of the paint out for the next time that you use it. The next technique I'm going to teach you is saving your whites. You can use masking fluid, and we will talk about masking fluid. PBO is what I use, or Winsor Newton is a great brand as well, and you can save your white by putting masking fluid down and painting over it once it's dry, and then once your paint's dry, just wiping that off. So a very good resist, but I'm going to show you something to use as well, and it's just plain masking tape. So take your masking tape and you put it down wherever you want to save your white area. And when you push it down, you give it a good rub, because otherwise the paint will come up under the tape and will crawl up under it, which is kind of bad if you don't want that. So I always say push it down. Another little thing is, let's say I have a shape that I want to have. Instead of using masking fluid, I always use masking fluid, like for whiskers, if I'm doing an animal, or something like that, for little things. But if I have a larger area that I want to save, that's quite a simple shape, you put down with your pencil the shape, then you put the masking tape over it. Do you see how you can see right through it? And then you take an X-acto blade, and always put your X-acto blade in the safe position. One time I did not, and I cut myself pretty good in my art bag when I was grabbing for supplies. So I come in here, and now people get nervous with this. You've got to just go deep enough only to cut the tape, and not cut into your watercolor paper. Okay, so it's a great way of having a resist. There you go, and then push that down. So you can save shapes if you want. Okay, let's put down just a couple more. You can also tear the masking tape. When I do abstracts, a lot of times I will tear shapes with the masking tape and put down. But just burnish it down with your finger. Whatever color now that you would like to paint, as long as you pushed it down, let's come over it and paint it. And see how the paint just goes right over it, holds it as a resist. Once the paint's dry, you can take it off and it saves your white paper underneath. So masking tape, it's a fun little resist. The very last texture I'm going to do is Zacdo Blade. We are going to have to use the blow dryer for that, but you take a color, and I'd like you to use a dark color just so it shows up well. But here I'm going to do ultramarine blue. And this is fun when I use ripping. It's actually using a x-acto blade. You can use a box cutter, a single-sided razor blade. I've put the color down nice and dark. Now I get my blow dryer and I'm going to hit that with the blow dryer because it has to be totally dry before I can come in and rip it. You holding your blow dryer, you can hold it up higher or lower. I would not hold it too close because you will get it pushing away too much. After we've used the blow dryer, test your paper with your hand. It does not, you do not want it damp or moist or anything. It's got to be, I call it bone dry, really, really, really dry. And I'm just going to teach you testing your watercolor paper. You don't test it with your oils on your hand. They always will say test it with the back of your hand is a good way. Just like you're touching a child's head, checking his fever. They say use the back of your hand. You can feel better the degree of the temperatures. Yes, it is completely dry, so now I can come in with my Zacdo blade. So I'm going to be doing this texture right here. Taking my Zacdo blade, people get freaked out about doing this one because yes, I am ripping the actual paper, but it is wonderful technique and I'll show you that. And you've got to push hard. If you don't push too hard, nothing's going to happen, okay? So you've got to dig in there. You can go back and forth, short strokes, or you can do long strokes. But that is an interesting texture. When do I use this? Okay, we'll do it on rocks. So I'm doing a beach scene and I want to see the little white sparkles of the foam coming up on the rocks. I will scrape around the rocks. I'll scrape into the sand to get some texture. I call them little white diamonds out there. If you're looking out on a lake or something and you want some sparkles, you can go in and put some little flicks into your paper there. Once I painted some old cowboy boots and I had no idea how to do the stitching in cowboy boots, and I came up with this and I went around and did scraping and it looked just like stitching on the cowboy boots to simulate it. So that was excellent. So this is a unique texture. You can overdo it, be careful. People do get nervous because you really do rip your watercolor, but it's also like if you were painting an eye, you needed that highlight in the eye, you can come in and actually pick out a little flick in the eye, which people will do, artists will do that, but you can scratch and scrape, okay? So that is with an Zacdo blade. It's a unique texture. You can find out more information about my online courses and see my work by visiting janiespencerwatercolor.com.